It was a quiet afternoon in the bustling city of Zaria, where the streets buzzed with traders and children playing under the shade of ancient baobab trees. The air was filled with the call of the muezzin, summoning the faithful to prayer. Among the crowd was a young boy named Aminu, no older than 19, with a curious mind and a thirst for adventure that often got him into trouble. Aminu lived with his grandmother, Hajia, in the old part of the city, where the walls still bore the marks of centuries of history, and legends whispered through the cracks in the stone. One evening, as they gathered for iftar after a long day of fasting during Ramadan, Hajia began telling Aminu a story she had heard only once in her youth, a story about an ancient secret buried beneath the sands of the Sahara. Hajia continued, "Many centuries ago, Sheikh Al-Fadi, a great scholar, traveled through the deserts in search of knowledge. They say his wisdom and power was unmatched, and that he possessed knowledge that could shift the course of time. Rumor has it that inside his scroll contains the secrets to immortality, riches and control of demons and other spiritual beings. But when the world grew envious of his power, he vanished. Before he disappeared, he hid a scroll containing secrets so powerful, it was said to bring either salvation or ruin to the one who found it." Aminu leaned forward, his heart pounding as he listened. "What happened to the scroll?" he asked, his voice barely a whisper. "No one knows," Hajia said. "Some say it lies beneath the sands of the Sahara, buried where the desert meets the heavens." This scroll had been lost for generations, buried deep in the desert where only the bravest or the most foolish dared to trade. But it is not unguarded. The jinn, powerful spirits of the desert, protect it, and those who dare to seek the scroll must face their wrath. A chill ran down Aminu's spine. The jinn were creatures of legend, feared and revered for their powers to both bless and curse. People spoke of them in hushed tones, afraid to invoke their attention. But why does no one search for it anymore? Aminu pressed, his pulse quickening. Hajia's eyes darkened, and she leaned in closer. Because whoever sought the scroll had to face the trials of the jinn, which tested both the seeker's faith and courage. And those who seek the scroll are never seen again. A heavy silence fell over the room. The flickering flame of the lantern cast spooky shadows on the walls, amplifying the tension. Aminu felt a strange pull in his chest, a desire, no, a need to find this ancient scroll. For years, he had felt like an outsider, a boy without a purpose. This was his chance to become more than what the world expected of him. Aminu had always longed for adventure, a chance to be more than just another boy running errands and dreaming of faraway lands. His heart yearned for something greater, something beyond the old city walls and the stories told by elders at dusk. Yet, no one believed a simple boy like him could do anything extraordinary, especially Hajia. While she adored her grandson, she saw him as impulsive, a dreamer whose ambitions often outstripped his abilities. As Hajia spoke, Aminu's heart began to ponder. The tale of the Lost Scroll of Al-Fadi had been told in whispers for centuries, but no one had ever claimed to find it. Aminu's mind began to race. What if he, A young boy with no great skill but a strong heart could find the scroll. What if he finds the scroll and bring it back to his city? The whole of Zaria would honor and fear his acquired knowledge even to dignitaries, and the emir would definitely applaud his bravery. Hajia, seeing how Aminu was lost in thought, knowing how silly he could be, warned him sternly. Be careful of what you desire, Aminu. Not all that is lost is meant to be found. That night, Aminu couldn't sleep. The thought of the scroll kept lingering in his heart. As dawn broke and the early morning sun cast a soft glow over the rooftops of Zaria, Aminu made his decision. He would go. He would find the lost scroll of Al-Fadi, no matter the risk. As it is better to die as a brave man than die as a nobody. Aminu quietly prepared for his journey. He moved cautiously through the house, careful not to wake his grandmother. But deep down, something ate him up. The warnings of his grandmother, the tales of the jinn, the countless seekers who never returned. Could he truly succeed where so many had failed? Aminu shook off the doubt as he packed his small leather bag with dates, water, a handful of supplies and a simple dagger that belonged to his late father, which he had never dared to use. His heart raced with a mix of excitement and fear. Aminu slipped out of the door and onto the narrow, winding streets of the old city. Zaria was just beginning to stir, with traders setting up their stalls and the smell of fresh bread wafting through the air. The morning air cool against his skin, he whispered a silent prayer for guidance. He walked carven streets, keeping his head low, avoiding familiar faces. He didn't want anyone to ask where he was going, especially not his friends, who would surely try to talk him out of such a dangerous quest. Aminu reached the city's limit. The sun shone brightly overhead. He stood at the desert's edge, with endless golden sands before him. He had never left Zaria before, and suddenly felt afraid. The vast Sahara Desert seemed to make returning impossible. But Aminu stilled himself. His path was clear. The legend of Sheikh Al-Fadi's lost scroll had haunted him all night, its mystery entwined with his dreams. There was no turning back now. With a deep breath, Aminu stepped into the desert. Aminu gathered his courage. He knew he couldn't change his mind now. His grandmother would have woken up in the city and seeing him return home with a backpack would create suspicions that would eventually lead to her skinning him alive. So he took a deep breath, and Aminu walked into the desert. The first day was brutal. The heat was unbearable, and the sand made every step difficult. Aminu's water bottle, full in the morning, was almost empty by midday. But despite the exhaustion, Aminu pressed on, using a compass his late grandfather had given him. By late afternoon, Aminu found shelter under a rocky cliff. As he rested, he thought about the jinn, magical desert spirits. He remembered stories of travelers who ventured too far into the Sahara and vanished, victims of the playful but dangerous spirits that controlled this land, and he started feeling scared again, but he soon got drifted away by sleep. Just as he was fast asleep, the air around him grew colder and a freezing wind woke him up from his sleep. He immediately sat up, feeling the desert's silence heavily. But what really scared him was the feeling someone was watching. He looked around, scanning the horizon, but saw nothing, just endless sand dunes stretching out in all directions. He was about returning to his sleep, when a faint scream broke through the quiet. It was soft at first, barely audible over the mountain sands, but it grew louder, more insistent. Aminu froze. The whispering seemed to swirl around him, circling like an invisible force. He could feel the hairs on the back of his neck standing on end. Slowly, he reached for his dagger, the cold still providing little comfort against whatever was out there. Then, as suddenly as the had come, the wailing stopped. The air fell still, and a cold silence settled over the desert. Aminu's heart pounded in his chest, but he forced himself to stay calm. He was a man. He would not be scared off so easily. This was just the beginning of his journey, and the desert must have been testing him. He had heard from the stories that the jinn liked to play tricks on those who journeyed too far. Determined to push through, Aminu resumed his journey the next morning, though the uneasy feeling of being watched never fully left him. He trekked for days, navigating the unrelenting desert, his body growing weaker with each passing hour. As he journeyed, Aminu's throat burned like fire. His skin, already cracked and sunburned, felt like it was melting under the scorching heat. He had long run out of water, and the meager dates he packed were just a memory. The Sahara stretched endlessly in every direction, the sand shimmering as if mocking his struggle. As he dragged his feet across the quiet desert, sweating and struggling to keep going, something caught his eye. Up ahead, he saw a river. Excitement rushed through him. He grabbed his water bottle, ran to the river, and quickly filled it up. He took a big gulp, expecting relief. But then, his eyes widened in horror as he spat it out. The water he had seen was nothing but sand, dry and coarse. His mouth was filled with grit. His heart sank. He'd been fooled. The jinn, those mischievous desert spirits, were toying with him, playing with his mind in the cruelest way. The hope that had lifted him moments ago crumbled into frustration. His stomach twisted in knots of hunger, but there was nothing. No water, no food, just the relentless desert. With what little strength he had left, he pushed forward, but the heat was unbearable. His body gave in, and he collapsed onto the scorching desert sand, passing out from exhaustion. Hours later, while his eyes were still shut, he smelled something familiar, his grandma's cooking. He could hear sounds around him. Confused, he slowly opened his eyes. What he saw next left him in shock.